Hey, Omni Dogs and Omni Kittens. It's Omni Dog here with Omni Dog's Vault and another root beer review. Today we are drinking the real thing, Earp's Sarsaparilla, which the sarsaparilla tree, I think it's the nut, that is what root beer extract comes from. So this is my first time actually tasting sarsaparilla, so let's give it a shot. Oh yeah, that's definitely different, but it's not bad. Yeah, I can just picture Wyatt Earp drinking a sarsaparilla after he guns down people in the OK Corral. I'm sure that's what he was drinking. Okay, good. Yeah, I like it. I like it enough to finish this bottle. So, what I'm going to be talking about today are three series. One on the radar, another that are a little bit under the radar, but people seem to be talking about them a lot, but I don't know that the general comic book populace seems to know about them. First one that's on the radar was recommended to me by the fabulous omnibus collector himself, Riley Moore, and that is the Elektra series, which is written by somebody that I wasn't familiar with, W. Hayden Blackman. Now, I am familiar with the art. That's by Michael Del Mundo, and this art is something to see. This is some really nice art. Let's see if I can get some more in it. In this book, Elektra is dealing with her guilt feelings, but she's also taking on major league assignments. But she's constantly haunted by her past and the love that got away from her. But she's dealing with a number of other assassins that are after the same target and end up coming after her. Um, this is not a run-of-the-mill Elektra story. This shows Elektra emotionally vulnerable, but no less deadly. But I really, really liked it a lot, mainly because the art is fantastic, but the writing really zips along, envelops you, and makes you want to keep reading because it puts Elektra in a lot of different spots, and she's the super assassin, and it puts her in a little bit of a pickle a few times. She ends up developing a relationship with some people, surprisingly so. Um, and I highly, highly recommend this book. Riley Moore is about 8 for 8 on his recommendations with me. Now let's see. This had art by not only Del Mundo, book two, but it also had it by Alex Sanchez. So this is what we're looking at as Alex Sanchez's art here. And let's flip to Del Mundo's art. Now this is a really cool sequence here showing Daredevil. Um, it's good because Elektra ends up developing a relationship with some people that you wouldn't think she'd develop a relationship with, and you actually get the feeling she has that she cares about him. And it does take a surprising twist and turn. She's dealing with um, the Hand and the League and Lady Bullseye and the Guild and Scalp Hunter and Bloody Lips and Cape Crow and did I say the League? That's from Batman. Sorry, I meant the Guild. Um, but she's dealing with a lot of assassins in this book. I highly recommend it. It is not your typical superhero book. You get emotionally tied in with her, takes a lot of surprising turns, and I think that you will really like Elektra. Very nice. Very nice action, impeccable writing, and gorgeous art. Pardon me while I take a sip of sarsaparilla. The next book that I liked A little bit under the radar are the a little bit under the radar, although it's by a very famous writer, Jonathan Hickman, and that is Black Monday Murders. Now, my good friend Luis, Hardcover Reviews, read 10 pages of this book and threw it out. He got so bored with it. Different books, different strokes for different people. I loved this book. Now, it's not an easy book to get into. It deals with the financial markets and what people. There's some really nice art here. It's dealing with avarice. It's dealing with the greed of the financial markets, and it's dealing with how people actually get rich in the stock market. How they've had to. These are the big movers and shakers. What they've done, what they've had to do to get to the top. And yes, it involves the occult, as you can tell from that gross picture. It involves the occult, but it's very intricate and very mysterious, but it's really well written. And I have an interest in the financial markets, so it's possible that that may be why it appealed to me so much, because it was right in my wheelhouse. I've been involved in financial markets for a number of years now, and I found this book nothing short of astonishing. I am all in on this book. It has got a number of characters in it, so that it's hard to say that there's a character that you really grasp. It's hard to say who the bad guys are because none of them really seem that great. There is a detective involved in it. He's the seemingly, the black guy right there, he's the seemingly only current, he's the constant in it because it revolves around a lot of moving parts, a lot of people coming and going. And it deals in a lot of kind of power corrupts absolutely, with a lot of it doesn't it's not, I wouldn't say you have to have an understanding of financial markets to get this book, but I think in my case it really helped. It's got a bit of a Lovecraftian feel to it, um, and it's impeccably researched, as usual with Hickman stuff. Very inventive, and I found it enthralling because I read it in just a couple hours. It's a big, thick book for a paperback, um, and I think the issues that are still coming out, as you can see, there's some symbols being drawn dealing with the occult. Um, I found it fascinating. I just found it extremely fascinating. I found it well written. I found it well drawn. The color palette is goes from mostly muted, as you can see here. Sometimes it's a little more brightly colored, but it is a little muted. But I will give you the caveat. Does deal with a bunch of it does deal with a bunch of financial market stuff. So that may be an impetus to you. Sorry, used the wrong fancy word. An impediment to you if you don't have a knowledge of financial markets. I'll just put that right out there. That's the caveat. And I enjoyed it a lot because I do have some working knowledge of the stock market and things like that. Well written, well researched, and really well drawn. Black Monday Murders is getting. Let me rate this. I will give it 4 out of 5 root beers. And let me pull up Elektra. Elektra also gets 4 out of 5 root beers. Really good. So 4 out of 5 root beers. That's a good story. That's a good score, rather. I'm having trouble talking. I wonder if there's anything in this sarsaparilla. I think it's just soda. It also could be because it's midnight my time. And now the best book. This book gets 5 out of 5 root beers. And that is a book that a lot of people are talking about, but I don't know that the general comic book populace knows about it yet. Monstress by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda. This is a little bit difficult book to explain because it's fairly intricate. It's 2 very thick paperbacks. The first one is one of those image ones that sells for only $10, so you can get into this for cheap, especially if you buy it off of in-stock trades for $5 or $6, whatever they're selling it for. Let's take a look at some of the art. Um, it can get, I don't know a lot about manga, but I know manga artwork when I see it. It does get a little bit manga-esque. The color palette is again a little bit muted, and this book is nothing short of crazy good. Marjorie Liu does a great job of world building in this book. It's a fantasy. It's got a little bit of steampunk horror in it. It's got a little bit of Art Deco in it. And the story is that our protagonist, right there, has a monster inside her, which turns out to be an old god. You've got in this book half-breeds between it's kind of hard to explain, but they do have an explanation of who some of these characters are. But there's half-breeds that look like this is our protagonist right here dealing with the god that's living inside her and growing out of her arm. She can't necessarily control it. And there's the little fox girl that is her constant companion, who's a half-breed hybrid of human and fox. We've got warring factions set in this fantasy. Let's see if I can find. Now there is a guide to. There is a guide. There is a guide to all the concerned parties in this. You've got old gods. You've got ancient ones. You've got witches called the Kumea, who do live experiments on the half-breeds, the hybrids, which is, there are some horrible scenes in this. It is a horror fantasy. But it is richly written and well developed. It is extremely intricately thought out, and if you give it a chance, it doesn't take too long to get into it, but you will have to stick with it, because also, if you're having trouble with it, there are always Professor Tam Tam's explanations at the end of every issue. And you can see Professor Tam Tam there. Cats are considered, they can talk, and they're considered sacred beings. Ubasti is their god, who, as you can see, he's got 4 tails, with the kittens there. And the cats are really cute in this. But Professor Tam Tam does a good job explaining what's going on in the past, how things came to be, what things are like now, and why they're like it now. So that's the first book. Let's take a look at the second book, which is a little bit thinner. But see, then you get full breeds, talking animals that are very sentient, very intelligent. They know what's going on. Let me see if I can get a better picture without glare there. And she's called the Monstress because she has a monster inside her who's really an old god. And she's on a mission. She ends up being on several missions. She has an original mission, and that ends up leading to some other missions. This is a very rich fantasy. It is very well written. You get sucked into it because even though the protagonist is not that likable, she surrounds herself with likable characters. She gets in one jam after another. She's very capable of getting herself into trouble and getting herself out of trouble. and you deal with here's some mermaids and ghosts of the dead that surround her as they're going to an island made out of the bones of an old god. Now, I mean, think about that. The island is made, and to get there, you've got to deal with this character who's made out of bones himself. He's like the ferryman. And let me see if I can get a picture. Yeah, here's a picture of the bones of the old god. And she needs to go to the island there to solve another mystery that she wants solved. It's engrossing. It's very well written, very well developed. It deals with ancient gods and current different life forms than we're used to. It is a really richly built world. Uh, if you've watched any of my other videos, you know I like world building, and Marjorie Liu does a wonderful job here of world building that's not hard to follow, that's very interesting, and I mean, I loved it. I ate it up with a spoon. This is my kind of steampunk fantasy, horror fantasy. It's everything you want. It's steampunk, it's horror, it's fantasy. There's a little bit of manga drawing in it, so you can get your kicks out of it that way. I can't say enough about Monstress. This is 5 out of 5 root beers. I cannot wait for the third volume. That's probably the only negative, is that it left me hanging, as a lot of times paperbacks do. It left me hanging and wanting more, which is the sign of a good comic book. It left me wanting a lot more. So I highly recommend Monstress to you, because this book is everything you want in a comic book. Well thought out plot, well written story, characters you end up caring about. You care about the protagonist, even though he's not the nicest person in the world, but characters you care about, and it's all leading up to something, but I'm not sure what yet. But along the way, the journey is fantastic. So I highly recommend Monstress. I very much recommend Black Monday Murders. And for those of you with a taste for assassins, I recommend the 2 Elektra paperbacks. So as always, hang on, take a taste of sarsaparilla again. Thanks for tuning in. I hope I was able to help you decide whether you do or do not want these books. I liked them all. So please feel free to leave comments. Feel free to subscribe to OmniDog's Vault. Let me know what you think, and let me know if there's any other books you'd like me to review. So thanks for taking the time to read this. I read it. Thanks for taking the time to view this, and I will be seeing you again on another Root Beer Reviews. Thank you.